A very good evening, everyone. Welcome to Study IQ English. Today we had the GS paper 4, the ethics paper, the much awaited paper because there is always a mixed sentiment between the section A and section B of the paper. While section A is usually considered easy by the aspirants, it's mostly about theory and static portion. It is actually the section B that's the acid test of your preparation. And if we talk about today's paper, that is 2025, I would say it is a very, very expected paper. From no means were the questions difficult. Talking about the section A, which had the theory questions, these were pretty expected questions on a scale of difficulty. I would say I would give this paper around 6.5 mark on the level of difficulty, which means it was not a very tough paper, very average paper. Let's quickly look at the questions to see how exactly was the trend this time, and I'm hoping that a majority of aspirants must have performed very well in the section A and even in section B. Most of the case studies were quite repetitive, especially the case study on Vijay. This was quite like the case study on Sneha that we had last year. Same dilemma, the dilemma of personal interest versus professional interest. Second, the dilemma between environmental development and economic growth. Both were similar. So I can say it was a very, very expected pattern of question paper. Okay. So having a look at that, if you look at the first question from section A, it says, in the present digital age, social media has revolutionized our way of communication and interaction. However, it has raised several ethical issues and challenges. Describe the key ethical dilemmas in this regard. 150 words question, 10 marks question. Now, in this case, if you see, this is quite like the question that you got in GS paper 1 and 2 as well. Because the question talks about how our usual Indian culture of interaction, social relationships has today completely become disrupted because of online media and digital relationships. So, which means today the communication is completely being determined through digital technology. That is how the question seemed. Therefore, quite an easy question there. Okay. And for this, we just had to speak about the ethical dilemmas in this regard. Is it okay to let the communication be digital online? Or is it fine that, we actually consider things like social media, we consider things like internet technology, WhatsApp, Facebook, and all of that? Are these threats to our own Indian culture? Because Indian culture is based on solidarity. And today, in times of digital media, we can see that people are not meeting with each other in person. There is no face to face communication among people. In fact, it is mostly through online technology. That's the question. So, the question is about ethical dilemma regarding this. Ethics means morality, values, and how do human emotions connect to our social reality? Very easy question. All you needed to do was to just say that yes, how? Because of globalization, because of easy access to media and internet. We today live in a world where, yes, there is a kind of unity among people, but completely that is based on online platform. Nothing is being done on a person to person relationship. Is that a good thing or is there a dilemma here? Yes, there is a dilemma. You have to talk about it. The first thing you needed to mention was depression and social anxiety. Second thing we could mention was a breakdown of family relationships. The third thing was that in any society, we should follow the principle of social welfareism. Absolute welfareism. Let's go to Immanuel Kant. Under his thinking also, ultimately human welfare is based on happiness quotient among a majority people in society. And that's not happening because of online based communication. That's the key challenge you had to discuss. In just 5 points, you could have discussed how only depending on online interaction is today leading to isolation among the youth. That is all the question. Very generalistic question. I would say this is matching social issues and social justice GS paper 1 and 2. Quite easy for those who have opted for sociology or psychology also. Fine. Now the second question, part 1B, spoke about constitutional morality. This is a very static question. And it's a very expected question also. Every year before the exam, I think all the aspirants are already told by the teachers that direct question can come from constitutional morality. You know the man responsible behind this concept. Yes, we are talking about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was the man who gave the logic, the principle of constitutional morality here. He was also the architect of your constitution. So you have to define first in the introduction what is constitutional morality. After that, you just had to speak about how constitutional morality should be the key guideline for a civil servant. We have to highlight how public service is not about making a career only. It is about a challenge you take to serve the people on the ground at the grassroots level. So you had to speak about how probity, honesty, transparency in public service can be ensured just by following the concept of constitutional morality. Definitely, you could have spoken about how directive principles of state policy in our constitution, the DPSP, here plays a key role. Not biting on the government, at the same time, a great guideline to the government. Very easy question, I would say. Both parts were very scoring. And I'm hoping majority aspirants would have found this very simple. Proceeding with the second question, part A, part B. Part A was slightly, I would say, tricky because it says, according to a very famous quotation by Karl Vaughan, that war is a diplomacy won by other means. For majority aspirants, this question would have caused one confusion. Should I defend war as a reasonable means of diplomacy, or should I criticize the fact that today, according to the latest directive of NATO, all countries of NATO and many others inspired by them are planning to spend 5% of their GDP only on defense and military? This is the reality of the world right now. The question is saying contemporary geopolitical conflict, which means question wants you to take the Russia-Ukraine, the Azerbaijan-Armenia, the Israel-Iran, Israel-Palestine, Gaza, the ongoing conflict in Myanmar, the North Korean territorial extremism, China's domination in South China Sea, India-Pakistan clash after the Operation Sindoor. In the purview of all these global conflicts, we should have seen this question that in such a case, can war be an alternative to mutual, respectable, smart diplomacy? Yes, it was confusing, but here what we needed to do was to actually explain how war should be the last resort and the last means. You could have used so much material from current affairs. IR would have really helped you answer this question. It's a totally current affairs based question that when diplomacies completely fail, like in the case of Operation Sindoor, after the Pahalgam attack, India had no choice but to conduct Operation Sindoor. Because if we did not destroy the enemy infrastructure, which are called as the non-state actors of terrorism, if we wouldn't have destroyed them, they would have come back and launched another Pahalgam attack on us. That is self-defense, not initiating a war. You have to justify this, and yes, you have to give current examples. Operation Sindoor would have been a great example here. Now, moving on to question 2B, it says national security is very important. Keeping that in mind, examine the ethical dilemmas, ethical confusions related to various controversies about environmental approvals of development projects in areas that are very, very environmentally sensitive in our country. Now, that is why I always tell you that please take your editorial articles seriously. Not only because it is good to know what is in the news, because it's mandatory to know everything in current affairs. Today, UPSC is a very dynamic exam. Gone are the days where you had very, very static questions. Even for a paper like ethics in section A, the theory part, you see so many questions right now are based on current affairs. Question number 2A was current affairs. Question number 2B is also the same. Day before yesterday in the Hindu newspaper, I spoke about the Great Nicobar project. How the tribal council is saying central government did not even ask us and launched the Great Nicobar infrastructural project. What about tribal rehabilitation, tribal compensation? What about the Forest Rights Act 2006? All that was under question. The same thing is happening here. Here you had to say how India, which is soon going to be now the second, third largest economy of the world, yes, we need infrastructural expansion. We need to make developmental projects. You can give modern current examples also, like the Great Nicobar, like the Char Dham Yatra project in Uttarakhand area. But the problem is these are ecologically sensitive. Now you have to explain how we need to have a sustainable infrastructural growth, because places like Uttarakhand, places like the Great Nicobar Island are very sensitive. They experience frequent threats of earthquakes and land subsidence. Imagine in Uttarakhand, in Joshimath, what happened. Recently, in Uttarkashi, what happened. Earthquakes are constantly coming because the government has still continued to give approvals to various projects and dam constructions, but that doesn't suit the local topography. These are very, very sensitive areas. If Uttarakhand is about the new Himalayan belt, the Shivalik belt, very delicate, very sensitive. The Great Nicobar Island is about the threat of island submergence owing to ongoing earthquakes and tsunami threats. This is the kind of answer we want here. So, yes, it is a dilemma. The government has to think of a very sustainable solution. Please give modern examples, give current day examples. Now, let's look at question 3, all the parts here. The first part was just talking about thinkers and how you have to elaborate on the quotations given by the thinkers. Again, this is a very expected kind of question. Every year you will get a quotation. You will get some thinker, his idea, her idea, and you have to discuss that what does it mean in today's world. See, I always say, I tell all my students that everybody is giving UPSC essay mains exam. That's a compulsory exam. Just 2 days back, we discussed the paper. You know that out of 8 essay topics nowadays, 7 are based on philosophy. You know that, right? I also keep telling you, practice more for philosophy. They are more scoring. The thinker part of the ethics paper is exactly matching with the philosophy paper, the philosophy essay questions in the essay paper. It's exactly the same thing. So, you know, in your syllabus, you have a set of 5, 6 thinkers. Well, you have to be familiar with them. At least one quotation you need to remember per thinker if you want good marks here. Say, for example, this time we got a question on one Tiruvalluvar, the very, very well known Tamil saint, okay, whose literary contributions are tremendous, a great thinker of his times. He says, those who in trouble, untroubled are, will trouble trouble itself. A very complex quotation, but all it means is that for those people who compare themselves with those whom they feel have no problem in life, whom they feel are blessed, and they keep thinking that we are the only ones in problem, they have such a negative mentality, they have such a negative mindset that they make their problem worse. They make a mountain out of a molehill. That's the simple question. Just try to decode it and make it easier for you. I think the same approach that works for philosophy essay works for the quotation part of ethics paper. It's very, very easy. All you need to do is the decoding skill. Now that you know we are talking about a negative mindset, please elaborate. Yes, you can use as many current affairs example as you can. The more you use, the better it is. For example, in this case, you could have spoken about America also. You could have said that in general, it is somebody who is always perceiving their own troubles to be larger than other people's trouble. They will always be the ones who will keep bullying others. A very recent example could be how America said that our economy is in threat. We experience a trade deficit. And it said that by creating tariffs on the whole world, we are trying to save our own economic interest. But later, the whole world knew it was a lie. It was a hypocritical attitude. Only because US right now is insecure. It's angry with the countries of the BRICS. That's it. You could have given that example here. Always root your answers in current examples. Then you can also give historical examples. For example, in Buddhism, it is believed that pray for your enemy, do not fight your enemy. Because if you pray for your enemy, the enemy, once is a happy person, will stop troubling you also, because everything begins in the mind. Later, it's the action. So, very simple there. Now, the next quotation is William James, again, very short, 150 marks. It spoke about how human beings can change his life through change in attitude. It's a very easy one. Similarly, we had Swami Vivekanand. Very expected. I tell everybody that Swami Vivekanand and Mahatma Gandhi are these two such personalities you should be very well prepared with. Even if you cannot remember too many quotations, remember their core idea. Say for Gandhi, you have to be prepared about satyagraha, non-violence, ahimsa, and simplicity. For Swami Vivekanand, the quest for eternal truth. That science also is nothing but the quest of universal wisdom. That's all you need to know. In this question, it says the strength of society is not in its laws but in morality. So yes, Swami Vivekanand ji's concept of how to create good values like honesty, probity, transparency, selflessness, kindness, gratitude. All these come under the ambit of morality, quite static directly from your syllabus. I think this was an easy question again. Now, talking of question 4a, again, we were talking about most of the thinkers, okay? And especially the 4b is most of history. I think in your Indian history, ancient history, you have studied Buddhism, Jainism, haven't you? So, if you have covered Buddhism, Jainism, then you know about what were the main teachings of Jainism under Lord Mahavir. From the 5th, 6th century BC, how various protest religions had emerged like Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. In that, we know about how Lord Mahavir spoke about certain clear cut principles that you can't lie, you should not steal anybody's property, you should maintain, a very honest and a very simple character, no material pleasures, and always the search of truth. How are these relevant to the current world? Yes, obviously it is. You can highlight how public servants need to have these attitudes. You can highlight how today the world is becoming extremely materialistic. And at the same time, we are experiencing not only a devastation of environment, but also high levels of mental health problems. By imbibing these teachings, we can solve both the problems together. So you can talk about that. Then the part A spoke about for any kind of civil re-engineering. By successfully implementing welfare schemes, a civil servant, a public officer should use reason and critical thinking within an ethical framework. Quite simple. Please talk about probity here. Probity here. Dedication to services. Okay, the charter of civil services, that also you could have mentioned here. Very easy question again, I think. And then talking about question 5a and b, the first one is about devoting your life to a sense of perfection in your duty. You can analyze this statement with reference to the sense of responsibility and personal fulfillment as a civil servant. So it's a very static question. Duties of a civil servant. I think this is directly based on section A from your syllabus, directly picked from there. Very direct question. If you have prepared for ethics paper segment A, you know that. There are 5-6 duties. We often talk this also in the British Charter. That is all you need to mention. And then the second one is about how a civil servant can create growth in a society rather than just controlling people around them. So it is about a good use of your power to change the society. Again, similar question, the duties of a civil servant. How will you achieve the goal? Slightly personalized question. So yes, you can be innovative here. You could have given your own suggestions how a public servant or you as a future public servant will do to take care of your society and its transformation. Now looking at question 6a, this is about ethical work culture in every organization is very, very important, because we should make sure that in every organization people follow rules, they comply with rules and values. Very repetitive question. Okay, just 10 marks question. And the 6b question is talking about Indian economy as the leading economy of the world, suggested by the patterns of International Monetary Fund. India will soon become the fourth largest economy. It already almost is. But we do experience certain gaps in implementation of various public funds. For example, public distribution system. social welfare schemes, or infrastructural system like the smart city mission, sufficient results are not coming. Where are these leakages? This is again very closely related to GS paper 2, urbanization, GS paper 3, economic growth. So here you could have used a lot of material from your urbanization, urban schemes like public distribution system, a PM Arogya scheme. You could speak about smart city mission, skill India mission, and then say, how do we stop these gaps and how do we make the schemes better? And then section B is all about your case studies. If you ask me, majority case studies were repetitive this time. Now, if you remember last year in 2024, there was a case study about Sneha, a lady who is working for a hospital management unit, and then she had to give an order to her brother to procure all the medical instruments and all the medical infrastructure. She was very confused whether to favor her brother or to just do her duty in a very unbiased way. Something similar is happening here. There is a deputy commissioner who is having a problem in the family, plus he is also experiencing his duty, his responsibility towards the people of the district, as there is a tragedy that has taken place. So, should he go home or should he continue with the duty? We will talk about this in detail in the detailed analysis section that's coming up at 7:30 p.m. As of now, I would say it's a very repetitive case study. That's the reason I always say thoroughly practice past 5-year question papers. That really helps you. Okay, because many case studies are repetitive. Similarly, another case study has come. This is about basic human rights regarding food, water, shelter. Okay, so here again there is a battle between economic growth and how to maintain environmental sustainability. Very repetitive again. Almost every year UPSC gives you one case study on this. Infrastructural growth, environmental degradation. Yes, please use examples. You can take a lot of hints from Narmada Bachao Andolan, Chipko Andolan, Parbitra Wildlife Sanctuary, Great Nicobar Island controversy. All of these very easy, very related to current affairs. We just have to know the format of writing the case studies that I will talk about in the detailed section. And then we had another case study which is quite similar to the Sneha and Vijay case study. Sneha last year, Vijay this year. That how you as a employee, as a secretary of the public works department in the state government is confused whether to favor your son for your family's benefit or whether to strictly abide the call of duty. So it's a typical ethical conflict on the one hand between Kantian deontological principle. Okay, Kantian deontological principle on the one hand and altruism on the other hand. See, I'll tell you one thing, to solve the case studies successfully, you have to be thoroughly prepared with at least 5 concepts. Okay, one is Immanuel Kant, deontology, the call for duty. Second is absolute welfareism, again Kant. On the other hand, we have the concept of altruism. We have the concept of some other principles that come in between, such as the concept of ethical morality. All these, there are certain 4 or 5 principles from section A. If you are well prepared with them, every case study is using them. Like this one typically is about deontology of Immanuel Kant. I will take a detailed discussion on that also. And then we had another similar case study on the implementation of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, Manrega. Under this scheme, some discrepancies have happened. Now it is your responsibility to conduct the scheme, to make sure people are getting opportunities in the village. But you have found that earlier there were certain discrepancies here. How will you take care of those? Now, what will you do to take care of such problems? That was all the question paper of today on a very initial impression, on a very personal, as well as on a very you can say experiential note. Given the 10 years of mentorship that I have had with my students, I would say it was not a tough paper at all. I do agree there were certain questions from section A that was slightly moderate to tough, but overall, as I said, on a scale of difficulty, I would give it a score of 6 or 6.5. Quite a manageable paper for those who have prepared, who have practiced case studies earlier, and who know the basic Immanuel Kantian philosophy, who know philosophy of people like, Russell and all those famous thinkers that are there in section. Correct? So with that, I will end the first impression analysis here, but then I will see you soon with a better detailed picture of this question paper. Then we can discuss exactly how should we go about solving these questions. And I will also talk about the format in which you have to solve the case studies. Okay, so see you, and see you soon with a better detailed analysis of the same. Thank you.